The Lord Mayoral race here in Melbourne is heading up. So the candidates who are currently confirmed include Rowan Leppert, Gary Morgan, Ken Ong, Jennifer Yang, Dr. Sally Warhalf. She's put her hand up today, Phil Cleary, and we still think, there's going to be one or two others as well. But joining me in the studio right now is one of the front runners, currently head of the Property Council of Australia, but running for Lord Mayor, Sally Capp. Good afternoon.
Hello, Tom. Thanks for having me.
Great pleasure. Now, you've got a plan to fix Melbourne's homelessness problem. What is it?
Well, what we announced today, Tom, is really focused on the long-term homeless. As you can imagine, it's a very complex issue, lots of different people facing different challenges. But for the long-term homeless, if we can solve that, then we're going to make a really big impact on the streets of Melbourne.
So what do you do?
Well, we've got a few planks to the plan. The first one is really about housing. We're also very interested in jobs. We're keen to keep supporting some of the programs that are working really well. And then for one of the shorter term solutions, it's to provide lockers to really deal with the issues that we're confronted with as city visitors, as workers, as business owners, to deal with some of those issues.
Okay, but I mean, if you give homeless people lockers, doesn't that, in a sense, make it easier for them to be homeless, like to live on the street but keep their stuff secure in the locker? Wouldn't that actually attract homeless people rather than get rid of them?
Well, the idea around the lockers is not that we'd have them placed anywhere and certainly not just in the public. The idea of the lockers is to have them within organisations currently providing services so that when the homeless come to use the lockers, we can also start talking to them about what other services we could provide, how can we actually help get them out of that homeless situation. And we can also ensure that it doesn't attract other sorts of activities which are undesirable, such as standover sorts of tactics or people trying to sell other things, let's say.
Drugs.
So it's really important that the lockers are placed within services.
Okay, now you mentioned jobs.
Yes.
It'd be great to wave a magic wand and just get rid of unemployment in general by creating jobs for anyone who needs one.
Yeah.
What plan do you have there?
Yeah, well, for the long-term homeless, it's basically unanimous across everybody I spoke to that if we can provide some sort of jobs, that sense of purpose, the idea of maintaining or obtaining some dignity and a sense of community through work, it's one of the main factors that goes into disconnecting the homeless cycle. And you will be very familiar with some organisations already involved in this, such as The Big Issue.
Yeah.
And The Big Issue not only have those wonderful people standing on street corners selling what is an excellent magazine, but they do all sorts of other activities with homeless people or people that are trying to get out of that cycle.
Okay, but if you were Lord Mayor,
yes.
I mean, what could you do that would create jobs that don't currently exist for homeless people? I mean, apart from selling The Big Issue, which a lot already do, and which isn't, strictly speaking, something that emerges out of town hall. What could you do? I mean, are there jobs in the council you could give them?
Yeah, I think there are definitely jobs in the council. I know that the state government has targets about providing these sorts of jobs as well. For example, I know that the Melbourne Metro project has targets around actually providing employment opportunities for disadvantaged in our community or those that may otherwise find it difficult. So it's there's definitely the opportunity there. I think the challenge is really around the leadership of bringing all those parties together and making it happen, because at the moment there's definitely the desire. And look, I go back even to the Salvos, and I know that you head up that way occasionally, and I was talking to Sheza up there the other day on the steps of Burke Street Salvos, and she works 4 hours a week, and she was telling me how it has completely changed her life. Having those 4 hours a week.
I agree that, if you can give people somewhere to stay and give them a job, then homelessness would pretty much disappear overnight. But again, it's sort of easier said than done. I mean, there are never enough jobs.
There's real capacity there, and I've come to feel confident about that by talking to the organisations that are actually on the street. I've been out and spoken to a lot of homeless people myself to understand what sort of difference would this make. And I've also spoken to industry and government to understand what is the capacity there. Tom, in 2006, when they did the last audit, which was the last head count, and there's one coming up in June this year, and I know you'll be interested in that, there were 247 people counted living across 45 locations in the CBD, 247 people. Now, we're not saying that they're going to be the next successful radio commentator on 3AW, but what we are saying is that there's definitely capacity to give them work that fits their skills and their circumstances.
Will that work come from the Melbourne City Council?
I think some of those jobs could come from there, and I have in this process, but also in previous roles such as CEO of Committee for Melbourne, been involved in the council talking exactly about this.
All right, 96900 693. Come and give us a call. Sally Capp will take your calls now. Another issue I want to ask you about is this boozy culture that's been revealed under Robert Doyle's leadership. He's, of course, the former Lord Mayor. That, a couple of hours' work would be done in the morning and then everybody would have lunch and lunch would turn into dinner and dinner would turn into God knows what at 10 o'clock at night. No, I'm not. I've spoken to people who say that's exactly what happens.
Experience?
No, I was never invited to these things. I don't do lunch. But I mean, it seems that boozing was a big part of the Melbourne City Council culture. If you're elected Lord Mayor, will you change that?
Tom, I think that things have changed significantly there already since Robert Doyle since he resigned. I understand that there have been a lot of changes, and just the fact that there's been a different acting Lord Mayor under Aaron Wood means that some of that culture and those practices have already changed. What I'm interested in is really having a highly effective council. Team of councillors working with the executive team.
So no bar fridge, no drinks after work?
There won't be a bar fridge if I'm Lord Mayor, not in my Lord Mayoral office. And what I would say is that my expectation is that when you are at work, you are there to work. And there are often times where you get together with colleagues and that needs to be in your time and under your steam.
Okay, 96900 693 13 13 32. One more issue before we go to some calls. It's been reported today the City of Melbourne has put forward this idea of closing off a big chunk of the CBD to vehicular traffic. So they're looking at a grid that's bounded by Bourke Street, Flinders Street, William Street and Elizabeth Street, which includes, for example, Queen Street and Collins Street, saying that no cars could be driven. Now, why would you want to do that? I mean, those streets exist to have vehicles, including cars, go down them. Do you support this idea?
Tom, I think I heard you talking about this earlier, and my first concern with this is we don't want to do anything that stops welcoming people coming into our city. It's what makes our city so vibrant. What makes the ecosystem so successful. So any ideas that would impact the number of people coming into the city, I think that would be a very dangerous thing to consider. On the other hand, I think some of the stats that were included that I've seen in the report are really interesting. For example, there are some peak times and peak places, if you like, where we see just this incredible overflow of pedestrians, and we know that it's dangerous. So, for example, our two busiest train stations, Southern Cross, which you have a magnificent view of here, and Flinders Street at peak times for workers, it's completely overflowing, and it's when we do see a lot of accidents. So perhaps some of the steps we could take is to actually address those issues rather than needing to have a super block.
Well, I'd put it to you, though, that and you're talking about the alleged rise in accidents between pedestrians and cars. I mean, I both take public transport to work, but I drive some days as well. And it's people who just jaywalk along the road, who have their headphones on or they're staring at their phones and they just stagger out into the street. That's the source of the problems right there. It's not so much the cars.
So what are you advocating?
Well, I'm just saying you could, for example, I don't know, prosecute people from jaywalking for more often or something like that.
Yeah, you could.